Following his crushing defeats at Leipzig in October 1813, Napoleon's forces retreated from Germany across the Rhine, costing him thousands of troops. The coalition armies paused their advance, and Clemens von Metternich offered Napoleon the Frankfurt proposals. This proposal allowed Napoleon to remain Emperor of France, while restricting the country to its natural borders, retaining Belgium, Savoy, and the Rhineland, but requiring the return of other occupied territories. However, Napoleon delayed his reply, prompting the Allies to proceed with their invasion of France. Despite the dire situation, Napoleon called up new conscripts, young and inexperienced soldiers. With much of his army still engaged in Spain and Italy, he had only 80,000 troops to face 380,000 Allied soldiers. In late December 1813 and early January 1814, the Allied armies began their advance into France. Napoleon, determined to halt the Allied advance on Paris, moved swiftly to intercept Blücher's Army of Silesia over its crossing of the Marne on January 25. With just 40,000 men, he advanced from Vitry-le-Francois, hoping to catch the dispersed Prussian army off guard. On January 29th, he struck at Brienne, where fierce fighting erupted, forcing Blücher into retreat, but failing to deliver a decisive blow. 3 days later, at La Rotaille, Napoleon's 45,000 men faced 85,000 Allied force in a snowstorm. Despite heavy resistance, the French were forced to withdraw, suffering 5,000 casualties and lost 73 guns. However, despite greater Allied losses of 7,000, the victory at La Rotaille proved critical. The Allies did not pursue. Instead, they decided to divide their forces. Blücher advanced from the north, while Schwarzenberg advanced from the south. Napoleon wanted to defeat the Allied army in detail, so he marched rapidly with 30,000 men towards the dispersed army of Silesia. Launching a surprise attack on General Olsefev at Camp Albert, the French forces ambushed and defeated his corps, capturing him. Napoleon then targeted General Osten-Sachsen's forces, despite lacking intelligence. Intense combat ensued, with the Russians being overwhelmed. York's late arrival distracted the French, aiding Sachsen's retreat. Napoleon pursued them to Château-Thierry, but after heavy combat, the Allies managed to retreat, though suffering heavy losses. The French failed to completely destroy them. Meanwhile, Blücher attacked Marmont's the Sixth Corps, but struggled to withdraw as Napoleon swiftly reinforced him, leading to fierce combat. The French cavalry outflanked Blücher's army, forcing a full retreat and inflicting heavy losses during the pursuit. In less than a week, Napoleon inflicted 28,500 casualties and captured 36 guns from the army of Silesia. Napoleon then went south. He struck Schwarzenberg's flank, defeating his forces at Mormont, Montereau, and Marie-sur-Seine, forcing them to retreat. Blücher regrouped, but Napoleon struck his left flank, pushing him back. Blücher joined Bernadotte, boosting his forces to 100,000. Napoleon advanced to Craon on March 7th, where he faced the Allies. After heavy losses, he forced them to retreat. Napoleon clashed with Blücher at Laon, but all French assaults were repelled. Exhausted and outnumbered, his forces struggled against fierce Allied resistance. By nightfall, after losing 6,000 men, he was forced to retreat. Napoleon retreated to Soissons, as Reims failed to the Allies. Napoleon marched swiftly. On March 13th, he attacked and recaptured the city. The French inflicted heavy losses on the Allies, while sustaining minimal casualties. Napoleon moved south, initially underestimating the size of the Allied forces, believing they were in retreat. Realizing his numerical disadvantage, he ordered a withdrawal, but it was too late. A brutal battle ensued, and the French cavalry was routed. Napoleon personally rallied his troops, even exposing himself to enemy fire, with his horse being killed in the chaos. That night, the French launched an attack, striking the Allied cavalry, but ultimately being repelled. On the second day, Napoleon faced 74,000 enemy troops. After intense fighting, the French were forced to retreat. After his defeat at Arcis-sur-Aube, Napoleon moved towards St. Dizier to threaten Allied supply lines and rally garrisons. Meanwhile, the Allies received a letter from Talleyrand about French discontent, marched on Paris. 10,000 Allied cavalry began pursued Napoleon, while on March 25th, at Fère-Champenoise, Allied forces intercepted Marshals Marmont and Mortier's course. After heavy fighting, the French were crushed, losing 13,000 men. Meanwhile, Napoleon defeated the Russians at St. Dizier. In Paris, Joseph Bonaparte defended the city with 23,000 troops under Marshals Marmont, Montcy and Mortier. The Allied army outnumbering the French, 42,000, by 100,000 men. On March 30, 1814, the Allies attacked Paris from the north and east. Despite fierce resistance, they were pushed back by the Allies. Marmont surrendered with his troops. Alexander sent an envoy to the city, offering peace. On March 31st, Talleyrand surrendered Paris keys to the Tsar. Napoleon, hearing of the surrender at Fontainebleau, wanted to recapture the city, but faced opposition from his marshals. After being opposed by his marshals, Napoleon was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, with the Empress Marie-Louise as regent. Marmont's cause was about to surrender, so the Allies refused his offer, leaving Napoleon no choice but to abdicate unconditionally.
The Allied powers, having declared that the Emperor Napoleon is the sole obstacle to the re-establishment of a general peace in Europe, the Emperor Napoleon, faithful to his oath, declares that he renounces, for himself and his heirs, the throne of France and Italy, and that there is no personal sacrifice, not even that of life itself, which he is not willing to make for the interests of France.
Over the next few days, with Napoleon's reign over France now at an end, the Treaty of Fontainebleau was signed by Napoleon on the 13th of April. On the 20th of April, Napoleon farewelled to his old guard, saying,
"Soldiers of my old guard, I have come to bid you farewell. For 20 years you have accompanied me faithfully on the paths of honor and glory. With men like you, our cause was not lost, but the war would have dragged on interminably, and it would have been a civil war. So I am sacrificing our interests to those of our country. Do not lament my fate. If I have agreed to live on, it is to serve our glory. I wish to write the history of the great deeds we have done together. Farewell, my children."
Napoleon was exiled to Elba and became a sovereign. Napoleon's empire had fallen, his throne lost, but the legend was not over. Exile on Elba would not contain his ambition. In less than a year, he would return, marching once more to challenge Europe in one final, fateful campaign.